Welcome everyone to Humentum's webinar on navigating the USG funding requirements. This webinar will be recorded and we will share the slides and the webinar recording in a follow-up email after this event. My name is Amanda. I'm Humentum's Director of Marketing and Communications, and I'm so thrilled to have you all here for us today so we can be discussing the USG funding requirements. We ask that everyone stays on mute, and at the end of the webinar, we will have time for questions. If you have questions during the webinar, you are very welcome to add them to the chat, and we will review the chat at the end of the webinar just to make sure your question is covered. And we will have a 3-day course starting in March that helps everyone navigate the USG funding requirements. I'll be sharing that link in the chat, and I really hope you're able to join us for that online course as well. And I am thrilled to introduce my longtime colleague and friend, Keith Edwards, who will be guiding us through this webinar today. Keith Edwards has more than 30 years of experience in the NGO sector, including senior level project implementation and management, risk assessment, corrective actions, compliance, internal audits, award administration, and all aspects of operations, support services, and standard operating procedures. He's an expert at budget and budget development, developing training curricula, delivering trainings, and interpreting the complexities of donor rules and regulations. And he has been a long-time trainer and facilitator at Humentum. We are so pleased to have him today. Quite a wonderful bio, Keith, and I'm so pleased to turn it over to you to get started.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. It's a beautiful day here. Well, it's a little bit cloudy here in Cape Town, where I'm based. I'm originally from New York, but have been living here for 16 years. 16 long years of working in this field and seeing the changes that have happened, especially the drastic changes that happened last year. Amanda and I were talking before about the year last year and what that meant for us. And to me, it represented the dark side of what we were doing and where we are. And my view, we are going to go into 2026 and we're already in the second month of the year. We are going to bring the light back. And it's up to us to be able to make it what it was before. Not exactly, but we are going to make it into what we hope that the future is going to be. I want you to keep two numbers in mind. 1.7 billion with a B and 112 million with an M. Those two numbers, because they're going to be significant about what we are going to talk about. First, let's look at what are the issues that we need to be considering when we are looking at the US government requirements. The changes that happened last year meant that there were changes in the funding. There are changes in the funding agencies that were providing that funding, and there were changes in the regulations because USAID, the primary provider of funding, is gone. And USAID had, in addition to 2 CFR 200, the standard set of regulations, they had all of those other requirements that needed to be followed. Standard provisions, 22 CFR 228, we had the ADS that were referenced. Do we still need to comply with those? According to the Office of the Inspector General, yes. But how do we do it when everything has been moved to the Department of State? We need to know what the regulations are. And now it's become a little bit simpler because we have one standard set of regulations, and the remaining funding agencies will include in their awards what additional requirements you need to comply with. So we need to know what 2 CFR 200 is, and we need to know if there are any changes. So for example, in October, I was going into the regulations and was surprised to see that there were changes to the thresholds. So for example, the micro purchase threshold was increased from 10,000 to 15,000. The simplified acquisition threshold was increased from 250,000 to 350,000. How do we know these things? It's up to us to be able to go in or find a source that will provide us with that kind of information. So, for example, those of you who are members of Humentum would get that kind of information through these kinds of forum and through the communication that they provide to you. We look at the best practices, the tools, the resources, and those of us that have continued operating, implementing our programs, it's up to us to share those tools and resources. So Humentum started this announcement by sharing with you a tool, the US Government Award Management and Compliance Checklist. Those kinds of tools are going to be really key in ensuring that you're tracking what needs to be done and that you're doing them. Knowing what goes behind those things. So, for example, the core policies and SOPs, and it talks about what those are: finance and accounting, fraud management, internal controls, etc. What goes into those operating policies and procedures? Where do we find the information? So those of you who are new to US government funding, it is in 2 CFR 200, a very thick set of regulations if you print them all out, but you have to find the way to be able to get that information. We do that through the discussions, the sessions that we have in the courses that are provided. And we talk about what are the challenges that you might encounter as you are looking at the regulations, as you are trying to interpret them, and what they actually mean. Once you know what that information is, you need to then be able to apply them in terms of compliance. And here is where we have some additional requirements that were not there before January of 2024. We always had the need to be in compliance with the award terms and conditions, but now we are looking at severely restricted funding. Okay, so, for example, in Congress, there is a discussion about the funding for 2026, and that bill is called the National Security Department of State and Related Programs Appropriations Act of 2026. Long title, but it brings all of the foreign assistance funding into that one arena. It is going to remove some of the programs that were funded before, and it is going to add some new funding. And I'll talk about what some of the programs are that are going to continue to be funded. But coming back to this issue of what it is that you're going to have to focus on in compliance, Mark Rubio issued a document that talked about what are the priorities that they're expecting to see in their foreign assistance programs. It's making America safer, making America stronger, and making America more prosperous. All of your programs that are being carried out will need to demonstrate that you are addressing those things. So your health program, for example, will have to show and you will have to document how you're doing this. How are you contributing to those things? By addressing the health issues in your implementing country, you're making the population safer, you're preventing illness from being spread throughout the world, including to the US. And if it's not in the US, it means that the US citizens, the residents, will not then be removed from the workforce and they will then be able to add to the economy and continue to make America more prosperous. Those are the kinds of simple things and some more complex issues that you will have to include in your reporting and in your tracking data you will need to be tracking to make sure that you're capturing all this information and providing it as you are required to do so. So you're in a workshop and you have this information, you have the knowledge about the regulations, and it will be focusing on the key aspects of your programs: procurement, subaward management, financial management, internal controls, all of the things that might lead to non-compliance, the things that relate to accountability. Those are where the focus is going to be. And that's where, when you have an audit, you will have your auditors, internal, external, the Office of the Inspector General, focusing on those areas to show in their reports to the funding agency and they in turn reporting to Congress, here is how the resources are being used and how it's contributing to those three key principles, making America safer, stronger, and more prosperous. I know we might not agree with that standard, but the reality is that that is what is the focus of the administration and what we then need to, if we want to continue to receive the funding, if we want to be eligible for future funding, because there will continue to be future funding, because Congress, even though we might think that they have relinquished some of their authority, they are still providing funding. So, for example, Trump had requested a 47% reduction in foreign assistance funding, which would have put it around 30 billion. And Congress added the 20 billion to make it a total of 50 billion. Not all of that will be for programs, but that's the amount that is being discussed currently. Why would we need to then know about the regulations to be looking at what this means to us? In receiving funding or being or considering going after US government funding, you need to always be in compliance with the requirements. So coming back to those two numbers, USAID had an administrative budget of 1.7 billion to oversee their programs. In the 50 billion allocation that is being considered, 112 million is the amount that is allocated for administration. This means a substantially reduced oversight, substantially reduced funding, but substantially reduced staff that will be working with you. Who is responsible for ensuring that there is compliance that is mandatory and has been and has continued to increase in its focus? It is going to be your organization. So you need to know what those regulations are, and knowledge by itself is not going to be sufficient. You need to know how to apply the regulations and take action to ensure that your organization is in compliance with the requirements, that you have the operating policies and procedures, that you're doing the right thing, that you're tracking your performance, that you are reporting and you're reporting beyond what is required. The days of NGOs, implementing organizations being bashful about what their accomplishments are over. We are in the era of being boastful, and we have to adapt to being boastful about everything that we do, everything, including your programmed activities that you are mandated to do based on your award and everything else that's related to that. You keep all of that documentation. Humentum offers a revised course that discusses US government regulations, and it's US government regulations, not the USAID focused regulations that we had before, where we were vertical in looking at how the regulations were applied. Now we have to look at it in a horizontal way. This applies across all of your programs, across all of the funding in the US government. It also applies across your organization because other funders have similar requirements as the US government. The US government is known for having more detailed requirements, which is why it's sometimes interpreted as being more restrictive, when in reality it is more detailed and provides more guidance. So this six webinar, 3-day course is compressing the key standards, your fraud management, your human resources, internal controls, procurement, travel, all of those key requirements that will be looked at in terms of compliance into those 6 webinars. Does it mean that we're removing things that might have been just as important? No, it means that it's taking away the things that you can address that is specific to your organization. So, for example, your NICRA is specific to you. When we talk about financial management, we are talking about what does the US government want to see in your operating policies and procedures, in your plans, in your staffing, in how you are structuring your reporting, your data analysis, etc. What is what does that look like? And the other pieces of it, your NICRA that is specific to you, can still be addressed by questions. When you are in a course, for example, you can pose those questions in the chat. You can post them on the learning portal through emails, and they will then be answered. But the focus is going to be on ensuring your compliance, helping you get to that compliance with the US government. So that means a reduction in cost to your organization, a reduction in time, because there's less time that you'll be spending in the webinars. Even though a 2 hour webinar is not very long, think of some of your own meetings that sometimes run much longer. And here, every webinar that you will be in, it is structured that at the end you get a takeaway tool. So, for example, if we are focusing on procurement, you will then have a compliance tool that will help you address the procurement issues. Those tools that your organization might already have are going to be essential. Standardization and tracking what you're doing, making sure that you're consistently doing things is key. And what is being looked at from the information that we're hearing from implementing organizations. If you're not doing something consistently, it means there's going to be a question about why did this come in? You might have found out that you were not doing something before and you suddenly started doing it when you found out that you needed to do it, and you document that. Here is how we have improved our systems, how we have moved to a better managed system, a better functioning system, more efficiency, etc. You want to show everything in terms of this makes us better. And because it makes us better, it also makes the program better. So I'll wrap up with some of the numbers from what's coming from this 50 billion, that if you are documenting that you have the standards in place to be in compliance with an award, you will then be eligible for them. If you are a current recipient of US government funding, you will then continue to be a recipient because you are demonstrating we are doing what is requiring and we are addressing the needs. So, where we thought some programs were going to be cut, in global health, for example, they have continued to, the proposal is that they will get 9.4 billion out of the 50 billion. For things like child survival, immunization, nutrition, public health, there's 3.5 billion proposed. There is 5.8 billion for HIV prevention, treatment, and control, with a proviso that those programs have to show how they are transitioning out of receiving that funding. So one of the things that we need to be working with our implementing partner governments on is how do we make the program sustainable after the funding has ended? Because what we have learned from last year is that funding does come to an end, sometimes over an extended period, sometimes suddenly. And with every program, my advice is that we build in that sustainability into the program. The big question, staffing capacity at Department of State. You don't want to wait for what is going to happen. You want to prepare your organization to address your current situation and what might come out in the future. And then you can, when we know what is going to look like, we can make those adjustments because you have the knowledge and you're then able to take the action to address whatever needs to be addressed. So strengthening the organization's capacity through knowledge, looking at what the regulations are, ensuring that 2 CFR 200 is a primary set of regulations that you are referencing. If you have old awards, be mindful you must comply with the award terms and conditions of those old awards. So you still need to know if you have an USAID program that has not yet ended and was from before January of 2024, 25, you have 22 CFR 22 CFR 228, you have the standard provisions that you need to still comply with, and those are some of them are no longer available online. Finally, keep looking at the regulations. In preparation for this webinar, I looked to see what is the current set of 2 CFR 200 and saw that just last week a new edition was issued. What are the changes in there? They haven't said, and as much as I searched, I couldn't find what might be the changes. So now we're in the process of going through those to see what changes there are and incorporating them into any courses that might be affected. Okay. I need to give you some time to ask any questions, so I'm going to stop here. And I don't know if there were things that were posted in the chat box. Um,
Thank you,
yes,
Keith. Time flies when we're having fun, doesn't it? I have one note from Shannon. Great to see Shannon's name in the chat, reminding us that Doge still exists and often
yes.
reviews budget changes before approvals. And one question from Floor. Do you know if current revised regulations still consider exemptions for public international organizations, PIOs, as USAID used to apply under ADS 308? E.g., NICRA was not mandatory, not subject to 2 CFR 200 financial principles.
Yeah. So I'm going to answer it based on what one Inspector General had said. If you haven't received an amendment changing the provisions of your award, then the conditions that applied before are still applicable. If you have an award that was transitioned to Department of State, then if they have not changed, if they have not said these standards, the standard provisions, for example, are no longer applicable, you make the assumption that it is applicable. It is better to over comply than not comply because non-compliance results in financial cost and reputational cost. And given the way that the programs are now being overseen or not overseen, you don't want to have anything that might be questioned as a non-compliance issue. So assume, unless you have something in writing that exempts you from a regulation or removes a regulation, assume that what was there before still applies.
Thank you, Keith. There is news that the current U.S. administration will move to bilateral agreements between
Yeah.
government to government instead of going through an implementing partner. Any thoughts on this?
I'm glad that you were not asking me whether it's happening or not, because we don't know it yet. My thought, it's not going to happen immediately, because that's going to require a different set of oversight standards. And DOS is currently trying to get on top of the programs that have been transitioned to them to work directly with governments. Those of you who have worked directly with governments know how difficult it can be because governments see themselves as we don't have to do this. And getting documents, getting reports, getting compliance is going to be, in my view, a nightmare. And with a reduced administrative fund for staffing, it's not something that's going to happen very soon. And when it does happen, it's going to be there are going to be issues that will then have to be ironed out before it then gets to a place where it's working well, if it ever does happen.
Thank you, Keith. One question here. Which industry specifically does the program support? Are they solely healthcare related, commercial related, industry related? Seems like you can cover all. I'm not sure
Um,
if that's related to the course.
well, if I understand correctly, program support Uh, program support within organizations we refer to as your human resources, finance, procurement, your compliance, all of those areas, and your program implementation, which all work together to successfully implement the program. Your regulations apply across the organization, to everyone within the organization, to all programs, entities with units within your organization, if I got that correctly.
Thank you, Keith. Will the Department of State still proceed with the localization concept?
Localization has become a bad word under the current administration. And I saw an article somewhere. I'll see if I can find it. And if I do, I'll give it to Amanda to send out with the materials. But localization is, all of the work that was spent on localization by USAID has now gone out the door because it's not seen as a priority, because it's not addressing, does it make America safer, more secure, more prosperous? It's helping the in-country organizations or government more than it is helping the US. I was disappointed when I saw that article that minimized localization.
Yes, and please share, and I'm happy to include it in the follow-up email after this as well. Do you have any information on how USG funding will be channeled from OCHA?
No, I currently don't. Keep in mind that the transition from USAID to Department of State, USAID still does exist, by the way. Even though it might seem as though it doesn't, it does still exist in a much smaller unit. The way that funds are managed, the way that programs are overseen, that is still being worked out. As Shannon pointed out, DOGE still does exist, and they still do have influence in how things are being structured. Um, we still have the discussions about funding that hasn't been agreed to, hasn't been finalized. Well, I think it hasn't because it was supposed to be by the end of last month, but I haven't seen anything that says it has. So how the funds will now be channeled is still being determined.
Thank you, Keith. And I think we'll be able to close on this question. Maybe you can give everyone a few top tips to end with. Outside of program indicators, how do you advise we track our programs to make America safer,
Yeah.
stronger, and more prosperous?
Numbers. And Shannon is on the in the meeting, but Shannon, I think, will support this. There's a focus on numbers, numbers, numbers. Track every number, track your spending. Look at how that spending applies to every action that you're doing. Look at the cost benefit. So you are, in your finance, in any unit you have, one of the things that I focus on is doing self-evaluations. So finding the things that can be measured and measuring them monthly, quarterly, keeping that data so you have your supporting data and you're using it to also improve your organization's capacity, your program, your operating policies and procedures. Because when you see the numbers and you're seeing something that might be going in the opposite direction than where you want it to go, that can then be the impetus to then take action, to do something. So gather the numbers, analyze the numbers, do something with them, report them, boast about them. And when you can't boast about them, do something to get them to the point where you can boast about them. So everything, your performance, how long it takes to do something, what is the result, what is the cost? Look at everything that can be measured in terms of numbers and do it, because that's what they understand, because that can go into AI and do an analysis rather than, we still have to do the narrative reports, the feel good reports, but attach numbers to those feel good reports also.
Thank you, Keith. And we'll cover more of these types of questions and as well as a compliance toolkit at our 3-day course on March 24th to 26th. Keith will be your facilitator for this course. So if you like what you heard, we really encourage you to join him at this course. I dropped the link in the chat here. And for anyone not familiar with Humentum, a little bit very quickly about us is that we strengthen social good organizations through practical expertise, curated resources, and collective problem solving. You have decades of working with organizations just like yours around the world that translate into deep understanding and visible results. And we create those practical solutions to improve finance and funding, people, governance, compliance, AI, and risk. And we do all of that through our individual, group, and organization-wide training and our new robust membership platform called the Solutions Hub, which is an organization-wide membership for peer-to-peer collaboration, curated resources, tailored tools, strategy sessions for leaders, peer cohorts, and more within our Solutions Hub membership. You can always look to Humentum to have the latest up-to-date information, and we can be your go-to resource. We're so thrilled to have you join us today, and for Keith for imparting his knowledge with us. Keith, any final words to share to close us out?
Oh, let's remember to bring the light back into 2026, and we will own our programs and we will do it in a way that it is going to be sustainable and that it's not going to be as affected by funding cuts as we were last year. I just want to add to what Shannon has posted there about OCHA. In this article that I'm looking at, there's 1.4 billion for part of, about 2.4 billion for UN programs. So I'll try and summarize the information that I have in here and give it to Amanda to send to you also as part of.
Thank you,
Thank you
Keith. And
for
I
your
know there was a
tips
few
and for
questions we didn't
sharing.
get to in the channel, so I'll include those in the follow-up email as well. Thank you, everyone, whether it's your morning or evening or afternoon. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you for joining Humentum's webinar. Thank you again to Keith.
Thank
Have
you,
a great
everyone.
day. Cheers.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye
Bye. Thank
bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anastasia.